Hi, my name is Sara Ilanit,
And I'm Kassandra Cam.
and today we're going to be talking about the National School Lunch Program policy. First off, in our presentation, we'll be talking about the history. We're going to be going over some summary of the previous and current school lunch programs. Then we're going to be moving on to the demographics, the social need, and causes and concerns. Next, we're going to be doing the policy analysis, talking about pros and cons of the policy, funding, and additional services. Moving on to recommendations for change, talking about revisions and suggestions to the NSLP, and last but not least, our references that we use to conduct information for this presentation.
All right, so going into the history, the Industrial Revolution started in the early 18th century and went on into the earliest 20th century. With that, the U.S. Industrial Revolution led to a significant population growth, and there was a major expansion into urban cities. A lot of people were leaving rural towns to look for jobs. With the population growth, there was an absence of regulations and policies in place necessary to maintain healthy living standards. That caused a lot of urban slums, as we know. And then by 1904, Robert Hunter writes Poverty, which makes major influences in the U.S. to essentially move a step forward towards child welfare and having better food accessibility in schools. So here we have a historical timeline of the major bills and initiatives that were passed between 1853 up until the NSLP was adopted. So in 1853, New York initiates the first school food program called the Children's Society of New York, and followed by New York, Philadelphia, and Boston, along with other states, also adopted their own food programs as well. And then by 1932, as we know, the Great Depression led to a lot of high levels of unemployment. Through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation's school lunches were not only being provided, employment opportunities increased because new jobs were created. Loans were granted to cover labor costs for those who were employed to prepare and serve school lunches. So because of the high employment rates, it also led to a lower market demand for food since a lot of people couldn't afford it. Farmers suffered a lot because of the low demands, and then even subsidies to subset their reduced price commodities were so insufficient they weren't making enough money. So what the government decided to do in 1936 was to purchase commodities from farmers to address the low cost of farm goods in order to reduce waste, and then use that food that they were purchasing in order to make school lunches as well. And then finally, by 1946, President Harry Truman signed the National School Lunch Bill, which creates the first national food program in the United States. Not only did it provide school lunches, it was obligated to serve low-income students at a free or reduced cost. And in addition to that, money was also able to go towards preparation, training, and labor. So now the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, is in charge of the Food and Nutritional Services, which is then in charge of the National School Lunch Program.
When looking at the population that accesses the NSLP, we have to address the amount of children who actually live below the poverty line. Around 21% of children currently live below the poverty line, which is a huge factor influencing the access and availability of food for those children. And some may find it surprising that the highest percentage of children who are actually accessing the NSLP are between the ages of 8 and 10, who are Caucasian and live in a 2-parent household. A majority of the children accessing this program are 13 and below, and children who are between the ages of 8 and 10 have actually the highest rates of accessing free and reduced lunches, while children 14 and older are accessing the program at significantly lower rates. Children who come from 2-parent households have the highest rates of accessing the NSLP while children of single mothers have the second highest, and children of single fathers have significantly lower rates than those in two-parent households and single mother households. While the self-report showed that African American students and Hispanic students access the programs at higher levels, the statistics show that those accessing the programs on a day-to-day basis are actually Caucasian students. When looking at the causes and concerns, we see that some of the main causes of food insecurity are pretty self-explanatory, such as poverty, high cost of living and rent, and increased family size with a low socioeconomic status, while some causes are more subtle, such as families with guardians who have untreated mental health and substance abuse problems, and families with parents or guardians who have a disability. Some of the main concerns associated with food insecurity are poor academic success, a decrease in cognitive and psychological functioning both as a child and later in adulthood, poor health, and a higher risk of health problems later on.
So there are 3 ways that determine whether a student is eligible for free and reduced lunch. In schools where 40% of the student population come from low-income families, they're considered Title I schools, such as, Hoover High School in San Diego. They're more likely to receive free and reduced lunch for the entire student body because 80% of the student body is eligible for free and reduced lunch. The second being if students are categorically eligible. So if they are already participants of other federal assistance programs such as SNAP, TANF, Head Start, more than likely they're already qualified for free and reduced lunch. And then third being income levels. Children with families with incomes at or below 130% of the federal poverty level are eligible for free meals, and then incomes between 130 and 185% of the federal poverty level are eligible for reduced price meals. And there are 3 major benefits and services that the NSLP provides. The first, of course, being free and reduced lunches. They provide school lunches at free reduced cost to low-income students. They currently serve over 4.9 billion lunches annually. And then they also aim at serving healthier lunch options. The goal is to address childhood obesity, since many low-income students don't have access to healthier, fresh foods. And then third is nutritional training. So aiming to train professionals to understand and prepare meal plans that will be more receptive by students. And then there are 4 major funding resources for the NSLP, the first being entitlement commodities, where the USDA donates commodities at a rate of 16.75 cents per meal served the previous year. And then in addition to those entitlement commodities, there are bonus commodities, which are excess commodities that would otherwise go to waste, just as we previously mentioned in 1936 when Congress approved the monetary allocation. And amounts do vary depending on location and market demand. And then there are also reimbursements that the USDA and the state of California reimburses to the NSLP for all free, reduced priced, and paid meals. And then lastly, there are just any additional grants that the federal and state allocate to the NSLP to provide for material, labor, and training. And then if we just break down, like we mentioned, the additional grants for budgeting, 44.7% go towards food, 44.5% go towards labor and benefits, 9.5% go to other direct costs, meaning supplies, contracted services, equipment, utilities. 1.3% go towards indirect costs, such as facilities, administrative support.
So next, when we talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the NSLP, we have to discuss that there's a huge strength that can be agreed upon by most, and that is that the NSLP provides food for children who may not have access to it otherwise. And in recent years, it has also begun to try and provide healthy and nutritious foods for those children as well. Some other strengths have been discussed by Professor Casillo in regards to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, stating,
if those basic needs, right, aren't met, then how are we going to expect our students to grow and learn and thrive and be successful? So food is one of the basic needs that in school, as social workers, if we know that students like falling asleep in class, not, maybe looks pale, just seems weak, like that's one of the first questions that we would find out is, how are you doing? Like, did you eat this morning? Do you need food? So I feel that that's one of the biggest strengths with free lunch is that it does provide that accessibility for students.
Although the NSLP does provide a great service, it does have many weaknesses, including being more costly, children not participating in the school lunch programs due to stigmatization, and a lack of education, which can also lead to children throwing away a lot of the food that they do end up receiving. Professor Casillo discusses some challenges of the NSLP, stating,
it's such a catch-22, right? Because, we're trying to have them be healthy, right? And we're giving them healthier foods, but healthier foods cost more. So it's natural, I guess, not natural, but economically, it's going to save if we give them like smaller portions of the healthier food, because they need to have smaller portions, but also because it's expensive, right? It's so expensive. So yeah, that's going to be an issue, and students are going to be still really hungry when they get home. And if all they have to eat is top ramen or cup of noodle, it's not the healthiest, right? It's like filling. But it's filling, and it's processed food, but it's filling, and it's going to get them through the overnight.
And Casillo goes on to explain
that it's not year-round, so we are struggling to have students, like on the weekends, like Friday comes, even the food pantry on campus here, we have it 2 days a week. It's on Wednesday and Thursday. Now, everybody thinks, oh my goodness, it's so awesome, you have it 2 days a week. And I'm like, yeah, it's great, and it's good, like we have it 2 days a week. But if I could change the way that we have the food pantry, I would have it on maybe, yes, once the middle of the week, but I would also have it on a Friday. Because when the students go home for the week, they don't have, they need food to last them during the week, the weekend. So there needs to be something. I know that some schools have backpack programs. I think that would be helpful for if you're in a school that has 100% free lunch, everybody qualifies, like a Title I school, why not have something to extend over the weekend or even during the long breaks?
As Casillo stated previously, there are ways to improve the NSLP through programs such as the Backpack Program, and goes on to further discuss how libraries should be included as part of the NSLP to fill those gaps. She goes on to say that libraries are...
It's kind of like our new day version of a settlement house. That's how I look at libraries nowadays, and that's the movement that we're going towards. It's like a one-stop shop where you could come in and just get, there's free Wi-Fi, there's restroom, bathroom accessibility, there's, internet, you can get job application services, just so much is at a library, and it's moving towards that kind of movement. So, school lunch programs is one of it.
Another way to improve the NSLP is through destigmatization, which Professor Casillo explains was a huge problem when accessing the program herself.
And one of the things that I've noticed is that there was such a big stigma with that. So if you were in the free lunch line, a lot of people would look at you like, oh, okay, so you're poor, or you don't have money, or, and I remember the students that would go, because we had Round Table Pizza on campus and we had Taco Bell on campus. I remember the students that were able to buy the pizza and the soda or the burritos were the ones that were lucky. It was like, oh, you're so lucky. You got money. You got money for lunch today. Yeah. And we weren't so lucky.
The NSLP could lessen food waste and increase the amount of students accessing the program itself. By focusing on a strengths-based perspective and including the community in the policy process, the NSLP could have the communities involved in educating more effectively and better understanding the needs of the community's children. And that wraps up our presentation on the National School Lunch Program. Thank you for your time.